I am honored to be with Mayank Patel, director of Mayank BrassFit in Jamnagar, India. Welcome to the show, Mayank.
Thanks, Noah. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's really good to catch up with you. Um, I met Mayank, uh, what was it, 2 years ago? Something like
Yeah,
that.
two
We
years ago, 2018.
we sold Mayank a Buffoli, a secondhand Buffoli rotary transfer machine. For those of you who are not familiar, well, I don't know if it's a rotary transfer machine. Maybe it's just like a trunnion transfer machine. But huge machine, can make parts by the millions. And you are the only company in India using these machines, correct?
Right now, there's one more company that is using this machine. It's there's a brand new machine that's just been installed in December of last year.
Okay, but
So
for a while you were the only one using this machine, which is, you
yeah,
know, my understanding from talking to you, the other people who the other manufacturers in India, it's like polar opposite. They're using single spindle CNCs that cost $20,000 equivalent, and so you have two of these Buffolis. How much did the new Buffoli you bought before you bought the one from us? How much did that cost?
so that was about 800,000 euros.
Right. Which back
And
when you bought it was probably, I don't know, $1.2 million, $1.3 million.
yeah, equivalent to that. Yeah.
Wow. Incredible. Super machine. Um, so now today we're going to talk about India, about what it's like to run a machining company in India, the different options, the different variations there are running a machining company in India. I think after talking to Mayank, his company is a bit unique, but India, one of the most important manufacturing companies on the globe, we thought it was really important to visit there. So let's get underway and learn a little bit more about you and your company real quick, and then we're going to talk about India. So first, give me a little background about how you got into this business, what you studied. Um, there was a little bit of a hereditary line with machining. So why don't you fill us in about that?
Right. So I studied in a boarding school right from childhood. So the independent, self-applying of everything aspect of life was naturally built in, right? And right from the age of 6, I was shipped out to a boarding school. I spent 10 years there,
Is that
right?
pretty typical for a certain
Back in
class of
the
people in India?
Yes, yes. Education, there's lots of variants on education in India. Like you have class by class, and you have different kinds of schools, different kinds of facilities that every school has. So you choose one which you can afford and which the parents can afford.
Sure.
So, yeah. And those 9 years that I spent in the boarding school were the best 9 years of my life, learning every day, right? And growing every day. And yeah, and then on, I was,
From age 6 to 15.
yes, that is
Wow.
correct. Uh, and then I was in Bombay for 2 years doing my undergraduation.
Where were you
And then
born
I
in India?
in Jamnagar.
Jamnagar. Okay.
Yeah. And then I went to London for about 4 years to complete my master's. And I studied international business. So I'm a commerce guy who got into machining and became sort of an engineer just by hands-on experience on the floor,
Okay,
right?
but you have manufacturing in your blood, correct?
Yes.
So
So
give us the skinny on that.
yeah, so my family used to run a big conglomerate of companies who used to manufacture a lot of types of brass. One company was manufacturing the brass rod and all the semis that go into machining, right? The other company was making electronic wiring and cabling accessories, and there were two other companies making hardware for furnitures, right? So right from raw material to finished parts, everything was on the floor, and I could actually get firsthand feel of every step of a product coming into inception, going into the market, right? So when I got back from UK and I wanted to join the business,
Mm-hmm.
the family was huge. There were a number of cousins and everybody running operations, and I was the eighth in line, so
But
not having much.
you wanted to join the business.
I did,
You did.
and I definitely wanted to join the business, but not as a manufacturer, but as a, what do you say, some kind of value addition, what I could bring to the table,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Because you had the
And
business background, you had the international background.
yeah, and at that point, there was very international sales. The business was more concentrated on serving the Indian domestic market. And when I joined, I figured that they weren't much willing to go out there and explore what's possible overseas, uh, and that is the trend that still goes on in India. When the fresh blood comes into the business, you have to toil for 2 3 years and learn the old ways, and then probably your new ways or your new ideas they start being considered,
Okay.
right? And eventually, I decided that the family can do what they're doing. I'm going to go out and start a small machine shop
Because they
and
were
put up.
sort of doing it the old way, and you said no, we can do much better than this. Is
Yeah,
that
and
about what happened?
yeah, and my father was the eldest one, and he was the one who was always innovative, trying to get into newer markets. So he used to visit the United States a lot,
Ah,
right?
okay.
Friends there. So he had seen all these Davenports, all these Wickmans, and all these big high volume machining, right?
Right.
And he always foresaw that market, that that could be possible opportunities to enter that, and get those kind of machines in India, and to somebody who could market the product, right? But the family was too busy to do that, and getting into the U.S. market, as I can tell you by experience, it's not a piece of cake.
No.
There's always a lot of hard work, patience, and you have to keep chasing. So if you aren't willing to do that, and if you aren't willing to put in the hours and patience into convincing customers to switch, you're not getting the business, right? So
Okay,
that's
so
that.
your main product is to the United States. Do you mind if I say who you supply to, or you want to just
No,
keep that? So
no, that,
um, you sell primarily to Parker and to Tribal
yeah,
Manufacturing.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, Parker Hannifin, everybody knows that, and the people in the screw machine parts world, they know Tribal very well. Um, it's pretty impressive to me. How do you get in there? How do you tell them about your company and say, "Hey, I'm different. You should use me."
you won't believe me. I can say that I'm selling to them, and I'm an approved vendor to them. It's taken me 2.5 years precisely
Two
to
and a
get
half
my first PO.
years.
It's taken me 2.5 years to get my first PO cut.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes that long because these are huge operations, right? And there's number of plants. There's always strategy that is changing. They give us one package, then something else, and there's lots of time that is involved in cracking these orders and business from them. But yeah, and this I started discussing with Parker when we first. Back in 2018, when we just dismantled the machine in USA, right?
Ah,
Because
okay.
I was getting additional capacity, and I could turn up the volumes, crank up the parts at much lower costs.
Were
And
you already supplying to Tribal?
no, even that's the same case. I've been trying to reach out since 2014, and it's only been 6 months that we've been getting closer to cutting POs and
So
getting
who
the
did
business.
you, when you bought the first Buffoli, who were you supplying? I mean,
We,
that machine is to make gazillions of parts. I mean, you can't buy that machine unless you have a customer, right?
right. So before all these OEMs we got into, we were selling to second tier distributors, right? In Kansas City, in Michigan, who were off the shelf selling to replacement markets, not to OEMs like the plumbing industry. The main reason to buy the first Bufoli was that we could machine lead-free parts on the Bufoli,
Right.
and we were serving a very big plumbing second tier distributor back then, right? And we were machining lead free, the standard free machining brass back in 2010.
And
And
so Jamnagar, that's the brass capital of India, correct?
yep,
Um, and before you, nobody was manufacturing with lead-free brass, correct?
correct.
So, what did you have to do to do the lead-free brass? They didn't even have it in the country, did they?
No, it was unheard of. You know, lead free. Once you take lead out of brass, it is very difficult to
And
machine.
this was for
It needs,
plumbing, right? So you don't have the
yes,
lead pipes. Okay.
yeah. We have all iron pipes in India,
That's why
plastic
you
pipes.
that's one reason why you can't drink the water. One of the reasons.
Yeah. So the customer wanted to move everything that we were doing in standard free machining brass to lead free, 100%, right? And so there wasn't material that we could use to even sample parts. So I had to fly in sample bars from Italy to try and run some parts on our machines to see how different it was, see how
Wow.
difficult it was, see how the tools behave, see what we needed to change on the tools, on the power of the machine, what kind of coolant we had to use, and that's how we did sampling.
So that couldn't
They,
that was not cheap, I'm sure.
yeah, it wasn't.
Did everybody
And
say you're nuts that you're doing this? Why are you
for the people
trying
in
to
my
get into
shop,
this?
they were all mechanics, and they weren't the educated mechanics, right? They were just hands-on mechanics who had 20 years experience on the floor, making tools, running the machines, setting up the machines. They told me that you are going to waste a lot of money getting the material from them, which is not going to cut. We aren't even going to be able to saw it, let alone machining, drilling, turning, threading, right? So I said, if the Italians and if they put it into law, right? So there has to be a reason which allows them to put it there because it can be done, right?
Sure.
If we aren't going to do it, there was a competitor in India right across the road, right, selling to the same customer. He's going to do it, right? So either we do it or we lose a little bit of money trying to do it, and or else we get knocked out of the market.
How did
So
you how okay, so I see you could get into Parker Hannifin and Tribal because you already had some customers in the United States. How did you get into those first customers? How do you say, like, are these people seeking out somebody in India to because they think that the parts can be cheaper? How do you? I mean, do you call somebody on the phone and you say, "Hey, my name is Mayank. I can do."
yep,
People from all over the world they email us. They have no idea what we do, and they're just like, "Yeah, I'm from China. We're looking for somebody to make our parts," and I just delete it. So, what do? You go to a trade show or?
Uh, initially, my first problem was my surname is Patel,
Uh huh.
and to get a U.S. visa for a Patel, it's worse than the odds are better in a lottery ticket than you would have in for a Patel to get a visa. I got
Really?
rejected.
Why?
I got I got rejected 3 times, right? And I had traveled the world. I had lived in the UK. I had been to Germany, I'd been to Italy, right? I'd been to Australia,
Did they think you
and
were Muslim? Is that why?
uh, no, they think that there's no reason they don't check your papers. The reason was that you are a possible immigrant to the United States. When I was already doing business with customers, right, and I just wanted to go see them so that once a year, twice a year, there's a personal touch to that, right? So the first obstacle was not getting the visa. So
So they thought that
uh,
you were just gonna like come over here and stay.
yeah, which
Hmm.
which probably wasn't the case because I still don't intend to, right? So going to a trade show in US and reaching out personally to customers was out of question. So every day I used to, once I finished work in the factory, I used to come back home with a list of customers I had to call, right?
Hmm.
I had a big list. I used to keep calling every day at night, spend 3, 4 hours trying to reach out and ask the guys who are handling the purchasing. And if they told me that call us in 2 weeks, I'd make a note. I'd call back in 2 weeks, and that's how I used to do it. I did that for 6 months, got 5 customers, right?
Wow.
And yeah, that's how I used to do it. And the first time I got a visa, I had already was doing business for 4 years. I came to US for the first time in 2014,
Hmm.
and that was also because of a trade show I wanted to go to, and I was at the IMTS in Chicago. And when I put in my visa, I had mentioned in the visa that I want to go to visit the show to buy some machines from USA. I want to see what technology is there. Last 3 years, you have been rejecting me. I had to go to Italy to buy a machine. If you allow me to go this time, maybe the next machine I will buy in USA, right?
And they
So
finally were convinced by all of that.
yeah, and I got a visa. In that interview, I spent less than 30 seconds on the window and I was granted the visa, right? So
Wow.
that was the first time I actually got to arrive in USA.
Very interesting. Um, okay, so you're making um, you're making parts for the plumbing industry. Do you have any of those parts you can show us real quick
Yep,
for the Instagram? And
yeah. So
nice.
these are these are plumbing parts for plumbing applications. These are compression elbows. These are machined from a profiled bar. As you see, you have an octagon in the threshold and you have a rectangle on the top. So you machine 2 ways. Similarly, the same octagon is used to machine a 3-way T,
And
right?
that is a perfect rotary transfer machine part because you can
Yeah,
do so many different parts with the CNC
yeah.
tools that
So
come
we
in from different ways.
yeah, and typically we'd machine, this is lead free, this is C27450, right? We'd machine this part in about 3.5 to 4 seconds flat,
Wow.
right? So each part is machined accurately, precisely, and to the print in 3.5 to 4 seconds max,
What kind of
right?
tolerance?
The tolerances aren't very close on plumbing applications. It's 50 microns to 60 microns plus or minus,
Okay.
right? So we are pretty okay on those. Usually in the plumbing sector or when we're machining high volume commodity items, tolerances are pretty not so very close, right? It's about the volume and the cost per piece, how you uh, get it as low as you can, right? So these are just a few shapes that we machine. This is a F1960 PEX fitting. This is from EcoBrass,
This is from what
right?
kind of brass?
EcoBrass.
Okay.
So that's 75% copper, 3% tin in it, and the rest is zinc, right? So this is the one that Chase and Mitsubishi had a patent on until last year. So we couldn't enter these markets and we were locked out of it, right? But now it's open and we can machine EcoBrass, right?
Interesting.
So there's various sizes that we machine in EcoBrass. Again, these are all perfect parts for the transfer machine for the Buffoli.
They look
This
really
part,
nice. Great
uh,
finish.
this part is about anywhere from 1 million to 2 million pieces, right?
And
And
what's your cycle time on that?
3.9 to 4 seconds on these.
Okay.
So there's one more size to this. Nothing changes. This one, the barb side remains the same. It's just the OD and the ID on the other side changes,
How big
right?
is it?
So
What's the OD and the
the,
ID on it for the people that can't see it?
it's the bar is 3/4 of an inch,
Okay.
and the ID is about 10 millimeters, and this side the ID is about 16 millimeters.
And so your competitors are making something similar. Maybe I don't know if they're making the leadless brass or not, but are your competitors making the leadless parts as well now?
Yes, they are making the leadless parts, but again, there's lots of variants on the leadless brass. If you're selling to an OEM, the leadless brass is of a higher, what do you say,
Quality?
a richer alloy, right? You'd have 63% copper. The if you're selling to a second tier distributor,
Hey, you
the
can bring the camera up now.
right.
Okay.
So uh, if you're selling to a second tier distributor, the alloy goes even more cheaper, right? And if you're selling to a very high level OEM, they're using EcoBrass, right? So
Okay.
there's lots of variation on the pricing, on the quality of the product, and where lead free is concerned.
Okay, so you were telling me before about your competitors. You say your competitors are selling to Eaton.
Yes.
Okay, now what kind of machines are they using?
So they're all using, what do you say, single spindle CNC lathes,
Mm-hmm.
where you only, let's say, if you're making this
Mm-hmm.
particular part, right, you can machine everything on the OD, right? But you have to part off from this end, and whatever the detailing on the inside has to be put onto a second machine.
Wow.
You can't,
So two
you can't,
machines, one machine with
you
the
can't,
bar and then a chucker.
yeah, you can't backwork the part, right? So that's the limitation. And it's a single spindle machine, so your output, the cycle time is anywhere between a minute or so,
A
right?
minute or
So
so. And is that for each machine? Or
yes.
so and then between the machines there's an actual person passing it from one machine to the other? Or do they have
So
some kind of conveyor belt or rotary?
no. So how they do it is they'll cut the blank of this part, right, from the bar, put it on one machine, finish the operation, then that goes on to a secondary operation machine. So whole basket will go on to the next machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's set up as the once a day later. So once the first part of the machining is finished, then it goes on to the second machine to complete the part.
And is there one person running each machine?
Yes, because once you cut the bar, you have to manually put it in the machine, manually take it off the machine once the machining is finished. Then on the second machine as well, you manually put the part inside the machine, inside the chucker, and then take it off once it's finished, right? So,
So how
yeah,
many machines would be in one of these competitors of yours?
anywhere from 20 machines to, let's say, even 50 machines.
Okay, and so each machine would be one person, so you'd have about 50 people running 50 machines.
Yeah, that's just one shift. If you're running, and on those machines, if you don't run 24 hours, you don't make enough parts to finish your orders. So you have to run those machines 24 hours, 6 days a week throughout.
Okay, so how much do you run your machine and how many people do you need?
So I have 10 of those single spindle machines. We run those 24 hours because whatever parts we put on those, also we need to finish up quickly. Anything above 5,000 parts, we will put it on the Buffoli, right? Even if it is 8,000, 10,000, we know we finish it in 10 hours, 8 hours, right? So we run the Buffoli about 20 hours a day
So
for
one
6 days.
machine, one part that would be 1 minute cycle time on theirs would be like 3.5 seconds on yours. Or is it
Let's
two
say for
minutes to 3.5 seconds?
2 minutes to 3 and 4 seconds.
2 minutes on one shop and four seconds on yours. That's
Yep.
incredible. Um, so you must be killing them then. I mean, besides having to pay for the machines. Um, but I mean, it's a totally unfair advantage, right? Does that make you be leading the competition?
The thing is, you have to think out of the box here, right? If
Everywhere.
everybody's right, if you are to sustain and if you are to survive, right? If you're to go ahead, sustaining, surviving, and then going ahead, right? You've got to do something different that nobody here is doing to be able to, let's say, call up a customer in US and say, okay, I can give you the same quality, I can give you the same, tolerances, and I can give you the same quantity you need, right? And technology-wise, I have this
Yeah.
equipment that will produce the part in 4 seconds, flat out. It's like one and go. There's no human
And you only
intervention.
need two people. You're there. Half.
Yeah.
You work. What is your normal workday?
My normal workday ranges from anywhere between 10 hours to 15 hours on the shop.
Oh wow. Well, so you still work your ass off, and then you have one other guy who
Yeah.
then goes
Yeah.
in. Why do you work so many hours?
I like a challenge, and making these parts is a challenge every single day, right? And more than that,
Because
every day
you're constantly changing between the parts. Is that why it's a challenge?
no, the equipment also, every day, I mean, you get there's something new happening on the machine, or there's some new error on the machine which you fix, right? And every day is a learning curve, right? So I like, if I put in so much money, right? I like to learn as to where the problems are and try to fix those problems and to learn from them so that we can, be in a better position the next time to discuss it with any supplier, probably, right? For
Sure.
the equipment. And yeah, so
So
I like to
okay.
put it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No problem. I'm saying I like to be on the floor. I'm very much less in the office. You'll find me on the floor more often than I'd be on my chair in the office.
I got you. All right. Let's talk India. A couple things: stereotypes, misconceptions, um, culture. Are Is engineering a popular field for people to go in?
Yes, it is a very popular field for kids to go in. There's lots of engineering schools and colleges and universities here. Uh, and some of the big engineering companies who are into a lot of aspects of business where construction is concerned, all other kinds of equipment and heavy earth moving stuff is concerned. Those companies spend heavily on having their own educational institutes to train people in various aspects of their business so they can retain those people, employ those people directly from the educational institute to their offices and operations. So there's lots of opportunities for engineering in India.
And there are lots of people that want to work in a factory in India.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. But the problem you were telling me before, the problem is back to those CNC lathes with two people, one person on each machine. There's a lot of variables that happens with a person versus just automation.
Yes, absolutely. So the biggest variation is if I have, let's say I have 10 machines on the floor, I have 10 people working on the same part. At the end of the day, he is manually putting the part in and manually taking the part out, right? So the machine cycle time becomes fixed, the only fixed thing, right? So if it takes too long to put the part in, if it takes too long to take it out, right? If I'm monitoring who's making the most parts, it eventually, the machine is out of the picture. It's the human who is there who is going to decide how much my machine output is, right? So that's my biggest variable there, right? So at the end of the day, no matter what machine it is, no matter how expensive that machine is, the human factor has come into play bigger than the actual capability of the machine, right? So at the end of the day, I am reliant on
Mm-hmm.
labor, which is variable, so I cannot guarantee myself the output of those machines.
What is the work ethic compared to, say, Europe? I mean, you don't, obviously, you haven't run a factory in Europe, but you, when the people from Buffoli came to install the machine, you noticed, you made various observations about them.
Yes. To start with, I've not run any operations in Europe or something, but I've been to a few factories. When we were running off the first machine in Italy, there were a few machines being built right besides our machines, and we were there for 2 3 weeks. And every single day there was progress on the machine. There were new things being added to the machine, and there was significant development on the machine building in those 3 weeks. And it's not like they put in long hours to finish that job, right? It was 7 to 5, and they would be gone, and everything would just work like clockwork,
You just,
right?
so
And
they were much more organized and they were more focused.
yes, and there was a log that what had to be done today, and those guys saw to it that it was finished on that particular day and not being put to another day, right? Which is very different to how it is in India, right? And I wouldn't hesitate to say that being an Indian, right, things don't actually. The reason why it's hard to put up with being on time, being on schedule, right? Because we say cheap labor, right? It's only we count it only as cheap because we count it in the way that we pay them, right? We
Yes.
don't. 95% of people don't account for the delays it causes, the what do you say, the rejection ratios it causes, and eventually a promise to a customer is not fulfilled,
How
right? So
much
that
do
is
you,
cost.
how much does somebody make, a machinist that's running one of these single spindle machines? I know it's really difficult to draw a parallel because things are cheaper in India, but
So let's say he would make about less than $200 a month.
$200 a month. Okay.
Le-
Now,
Less
in
than,
less than $200 a month for, a typical machinist, somebody that's been there a little while.
yeah.
Okay. And so if you make less than $200 a month in rupees, what does that buy you? I mean, how much is food? How much is housing? I mean, to be honest, I really don't know that much about what it's like to live there. I'm sure there's just so many different standards of living.
Oh yes. So how the culture is here in India, it is more of a family culture, right? So the kids still live with parents, and even I live with my parents, and my grandparents also live with us,
Okay,
right?
so that
So
saves money.
so you have a family home which has been passed on from generations to generations. And if you don't have a family home, right, you are renting it out. So there are the whole family is working, right? So each one contributes towards how you live. And then there are various standards of living, how much you can afford. You have a bigger house, you have a bigger car, you have, so that way, right? So you don't have to have your own housing, you don't have to have your own car. It's all a family. But now there are also nuclear families where it's just let's say a machinist. He's living on his own, right? And he's a programmer. He programs all the machines, sets up all the machines. So he makes about let's say about $600-700 a month,
Okay, so this
right?
is like a manager,
No, he
middle
would be the one.
manager, or a
No,
skilled, more skilled worker.
yeah, more skilled, and he would be the one who's setting up the machines.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who's making less than $200, he's an operator, right? So he's just going to run the machine, right? He doesn't have to do any tool changes on the machine, right? He will keep checking the parts during the production runs, and this guy would monitor all the operations and set up parts changeovers and all that stuff. So that he will make a good amount of money, right? So he's qualified, he's educated, he has a what do you say, a degree or something in
Mm-hmm.
machining, and mechanical background. Whereas the guys who are making less than $200, they aren't the skilled laborers, right? You
Right.
basically just teach them how to operate the machine, load the machine, unload the part, and start the cycle. That's
Could
it.
one of them work their way up the ladder?
Oh
Get
yes,
go. I
yeah.
mean, is that common for them to go to engineering school later? Or
So they don't go to engineering school later. If we see someone as who has the capability to go up the ladder, right? We will put him alongside the guy who is setting up the
mm-hmm.
parts, so he can at least set up the tools, take the offsets, right? See how the programming works, right? And we in-house also we have sometimes we have these weekly or twice in 2 weeks we have guys who are willing to learn programming. We have the senior programmer giving them notes and making getting them up the ladder, and so eventually we don't have to go out and pay much higher. We can scale these guys up and get them to be more.
So somebody that's making $200 one day, if they're bright and they work hard, they could make 800.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And this business is always growing. There's no limitation to this, right? So there's always opportunity there itself. You don't need to look outside. Of course, there is opportunity outside as well, right? So people also look for better opportunities where they get paid better, which is
How,
like a
how
natural
much?
course.
How many employees do you have? Just like 4 or 5?
No, on the Buffoli side of it, 4 or 5, right? The others, we have those 10 single spindle lathes.
Right.
So,
10
but we
people for
don't. We have 5 people running 2 machines each, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we feed long bars and we use a bar puller on the machine. We don't cut the blanks,
Okay.
right? And then we also have those mechanical manual operated machines to work the parts that don't require CNC operations,
Okay.
right? So
Um. So just a little bit back to the salary. I want to know. So $200 a day, and you may
not
not
bad.
feel comfortable
A
pulling
month.
this out of your behind, but I mean, $200 a day in a certain area of India, is that like, or not a $200 a day, $200 a month or less than that? What would that be equivalent in U.S. dollars? $1,000 a month,
Maybe more.
maybe more.
No, come again. Can you repeat that question?
Well, I mean, okay, so you said that there are less expenses because people live with a larger family. Um, a lot of the fixed expenses they don't have, but like as far as expenses that they do have, as far as buying food or um, entertainment or like how far does $200 a month get you in Italy, not in Italy, in India compared to if if it was the U.S. Would it be like two? Would it be like $1,500 a month or $1,000 a month in the United States? Or
No, let's say it could be
you
about.
don't know that?
Let's say it should be about 600, 700 maybe. I'm not sure.
Okay, so still, it's not a ton of money.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
That's why they say China is cheap labor, India is cheap labor, right?
and that's why still people in the U.S. are going there. Um, just a few stereotypes and misconceptions, and um, well, maybe they're misconceptions. I don't know. Indian people, they're known to be hard-nosed negotiators. Now, I'm
This is
assuming this depends on where you are in India. I mean, culture probably shifts, but I mean, this is the stereotype. Um, shed a little light on that. This is something I've been
sure.
curious about. Trying to sell machines to
Yes,
Indian
that is
people, it's not
exactly
easy.
where, yeah, that is exactly where I'm coming at. So in India, right, so all this automation and what do you say, expensive machines is a big no-no. You've got to be someone crazy like me to actually go out there and get that, right? Because it's not a misconception, but we don't like to spend much on technology
Hmm.
when we we want it, but we don't want to spend too much on it. Right? So I get told off when I spend $1 million on a transfer machine,
They think you're
right?
crazy.
So I could get 50 machines, 50 of those single spindle lathes on my floor instead of one machine. So why would I go and spend $1 million on some machine when I could have 50 of those doing my job for me, right?
Hmm?
So 50 machines, 50 different setups, 50 different operators, 50 different outputs. Same part, if you run on 50 machines, you get different tolerances,
Right.
right? So that is all pictured in.
Well, so people tell me, I've heard, maybe I've heard this from Indian people, or maybe I've heard this from people that have heard this from Indian people. People say, "Oh, you're on the street and you want to buy a carton of eggs," and one person says, you know, $1 equivalent, and the other person says $10 equivalent, and then you go back and forth until finally somebody wins. Um, is this true?
Yes, absolutely, it is true.
Okay, so when
But there's
I'm
negotiations. There's negotiations on every aspect of purchase or sale. It's not just machines. It's not just what do you say, your machine tools or your materials or anything. It's everywhere.
does that annoy you, or do
To
you
some
like
point,
it?
yes. To some point, yes. It annoys me because if you have to buy it, right, it's the same. You got to decide what quality you want to buy, right? There's a ton of options available, right? You could go to China. You could go to. I'd speak on the machining, on the machine tool industry. You could go to China. You could go to Taiwan, right? You could go any place you like, right? At the end of the day, you got to decide you want a machine that lasts 50 years, or a machine that lasts 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and yeah.
Well, for instance, when we're quoting a machine to India, you know, okay, knowing that, I'm thinking, all right, give them a pretty high price because they're going to give me a low price. Um, that doesn't seem to work. It seems like people just go away uh, immediately unless you already give people a low price. Unless you're selling a Buffoli. That's hardly been used. Um, so I don't know. I guess what advice would you give for me? Say I'm trying to sell a screw machine to India and it's used. I do I need to come in with something pretty low at the beginning already, or are people? Because generally people just go away.
I'll tell you why they go away. There's lots of screw machining possibilities in brass, right? That's where most of the screw machines run in USA, right? But there's none. Let's say me being one doesn't count, right? There's none where we are at, right? So the problem is they haven't experienced the technology, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they haven't seen the technology, how it works. And once the machine is bought, they don't know what the feedback is, how do they service it, or how it's going to run. And they don't have access to those kind of even trade shows, let's say, right? So it's all locked up. Whereas you go to see, this is just one part. There's lots of multi-spindle screw machines in Bangalore, right? So there are people who go out
Yeah.
to get those machines, service those machines. I know one guy who runs there. He has a fleet of engineers, and he takes contracts in machine shops to run those machines, and he trains these engineers day in day out. So he runs about 5, 6 operations for just on contract system running these screw machines, and
Mm-hmm.
these are all machining steel and whatnot. So it's just that brass, and it's an unorganized sector, and nobody in Jamnagar has that kind of exposure to this kind of technology. So that's the one that is hampering the mm, screw machine companies
Right.
to come into it.
Well, so it sounds like what you're saying is it's just sort of the standard too. Like in their mind, they feel like this is what it should cost. So if you offer it to them for a lot, expecting them to make you a counter offer, whatever, it doesn't work like that. Is it also
And,
because we're Americans and they think
it's nothing
they're
against Americans. It's nothing against Americans. And yeah, if you speak to the European, they don't. If I sent a code request to Fifner, right, I'd have to follow up for 2 3 weeks to even get them to consider my request to code. I wouldn't get a code, right, unless I'm dead serious, because they know it doesn't work out. Not to waste time making a code and offering a cycle time or cycle time study, or
yeah.
but it's not going to happen. It's not realistic. They just want to check the price, and it's not going to happen. It happened with me. I wouldn't speak about anybody else. So when I wanted to buy this transfer machine, I contacted the biggest transfer machine makers in Italy. Not one of them responded, but Buffoli did. Right? So Buffoli got the business. The others didn't. And once they didn't,
Interesting.
when we ran off the machine in Italy, we bought the brass bars from Newty Transfer's a sister company. So that's how they came to know that we bought this transfer machine. And then after that, they called us saying you didn't give us a chance. And when I had sent a ton of email requesting for a code, consider my proposal, and I'm interested, but it wasn't looked at. And he
Yeah.
told me a very interesting story that 3 years back, before the first Buffoli we bought, they had come to India to investigate a possibility for selling transfer machines. And the scenarios they saw here, right, they just went back with a thought that there's no transfer machine coming to Jamnagar ever because there's no possibility of anybody changing their mindset. So we thought that even you would be the same, just looking, fishing around, and nothing's going to actually happen. So,
Oh, you thought
yeah.
Graff-Pinkert would be the same.
No, no, no. They thought Newty Transfers thought that
Uh
when I was for a machine, they wouldn't be interested.
yeah. Well, I have to say, when we get a lot of inquiries, particularly from Turkey, it seems like everybody is just pricing. Everybody is, and maybe they aren't, but then they're like, I can get something way cheaper in Europe, and they're probably telling me the truth. But it's annoying. You almost nowadays when somebody calls, I often just say, if you're interested, call me because then you know may they still may be just trying to price the machine, but at least they had the courtesy to call me
Yeah,
and
they took the time to call you.
yeah, yeah. Um, are you optimistic about India advancing advancing their technology, uh, prospering at upping their standard of living? If you talk to demographics experts, they say, well, India, the population is exploding, and so they're going to have this advantage over China, and United States is okay because our population growth is sort of stable. But Europe is in trouble, China's in trouble, but India, they have this huge advantage. But clearly, the cultural advantage, it sounds like things are advancing slowly. So what do you see? Do you see big changes and quickly?
Change is always slow when you talk about a nation of 1.3 billion people. Change won't happen overnight, right?
Change won't
So
happen overnight, you said?
yes, I mean, it's the current prime minister. He's trying to change the country from what it was for the last 40, 50 years. And he's taking good steps to making sure that there is transformation. And India in itself is a huge market. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
biggest automakers, the biggest car manufacturing companies
But you don't
are.
sell to India very much. That's a small
No,
part of your business.
that's. I mean, we don't sell at all,
Okay.
right? Because brass is pretty unorganized in India, right?
Hmm.
Because you have to sell. Everyone's looking for cheap product,
Mm-hmm.
right? And quality is not a big concern. The pricing is, right? So where do you price? How do you get your price down? I
But
mean,
if you're,
unless
but
you.
like Tata Motors, don't they have high quality requirements?
Yeah, but they don't use much of brass, or let's
O-
say not good quantities.
Okay, but
So
I mean, are if you were to opine on some other material, like you know, steel or stainless steel or whatever, those people have higher standards for those.
yeah, whatever goes into your OEM factories into building cars and all that is high standard, right? So so wherever these automotive factories are, they ensure that they also have space for the vendors who are all around the factory, right? So a lot of places have the government has given incentives to build automotive plants, and where the supplier program is the suppliers are already around the plant, right? Very close proximity, you could say. You know, a couple
Mm-hmm.
of hours supplies are in, so you don't rely much on getting those goods in from long distances. So, and India still heavily relies on Chinese import as well. Right? A lot of brass is imported cheaper from China, right?
Interesting.
Then, yeah, it is also that is also the case,
And so
right?
is that changing? Is there reshoring to India? And is the reshoring from India going to the United States?
Reshoring from China to India is happening a lot because
That
of this
is
corona.
interesting.
Yes. So India, in a lot of sectors, India was importing about almost 1 to 2 million tons of aluminum foil for packaging, right? India is a big consumer of packaged foods, right? So for packaging, we were importing that amount of aluminum foil. And now, for the last 3 years, the government has put anti-dumping duties, tariffs on Chinese foil. So the local manufacturers have invested money in high quality plants from Europe, close to 30 million, 40 million to roll the aluminum foil, right? So yes, there's lots of reshoring happening as well from China to India.
Interesting. But what about in the United States, reshoring from India back to the United States?
United States doesn't buy as much. I'll talk of brass. They don't buy as much as they do in China. So even if they reshore a lot of it from China,
Okay. What
it
about
will
some other
still.
material? Or you can't give your input on that.
So steel is still being sourced from China and
Mm-hmm.
India, even if the tariffs were. We anticipated that when the parts there was tariffs on the steel parts that was put on the Chinese steel, right? We would get the benefit of it, but we didn't see any of that coming through. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we don't. We even say that we can machine steel, stainless steel. We do that, right? But we didn't see much of that coming through because what we saw was the market eventually absorbed the 25% that was put on the steel parts. So they still kept coming in from China.
No, I'm talking about the United States. Is work that was in India coming back to the United States?
In fact, we're getting a lot of it now. I mean,
Okay.
we're getting more business than we were before. So
Okay, so you're getting it from China rather than United States
no,
getting business from India.
yeah, I mean, we're getting more business from USA right now.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about myself, right? Then I would I anticipated before. So
But
I'm
you
not sure
don't
what's.
but you can't really give your opinion on other.
No, not that I know of. No.
Okay. Um what is what's one of the most interesting things you learned in the last 7 days?
Ah, so we were given a part to machine in stainless steel, which I had never machined before, and it was a big opportunity to diversify something from brass to,
Uh-huh.
machining something else, not relying on it. And we did that successfully, and it was a bit of a complicated part. And we submitted those samples, and yeah, we're awaiting the output of it. So yeah, I'm hoping it goes through.
That's exciting. That
Yeah,
is exciting.
and, and it's close to.
Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap this up? Anything you'd like to say to the people of the world?
Well, to the people of the world, the situation right now is a bit difficult. It's on all of us to hang in there, pull up our socks, be careful, be safe, and keep putting our best effort into what we do every day. And let's hope for the world that all this goes away and life can return back to normal.
Great. I didn't even ask one question about the whole thing. It didn't even occur to me. That's how interested I was in this interview. So, if people, if people are interested in learning more about your company, um, where should they go? Do you guys have a website?
It's being put up right now. You can contact me on my email address.
Okay.
It's mayank@mayankbrassfit.com. And I can share my cell phone number, and I'm on LinkedIn.
You could contact us too, and maybe we could put you in touch.
Yep.
But and if you're curious, let me know. I didn't ask about COVID-19. I might as well right now before I wrap it up. How much has it affected you? In the 1 minute answer.
So it's affected us in a, what do you say? The lockdown did affect us. Some of the people who were working with us wanted to go back home, and we had to let them go back home because nobody knew what was going to happen. And during those times, we had some opportunities which we could encash. From the ventilators at GE and Ford were building, those 50,000 ventilators. We had one small part that we got sent to make. We made the sample, we shipped it out, PPAP'd it, got it approved, but because of all the delays on the transit and samples going in, we didn't get the business. And yeah, so.
Very good. Thank you so much, Mayank. It was so good to catch up, and hopefully we can sell you something else interesting one day. And I wish you all the best of luck. It sounds like you're doing creative things that other people aren't doing, and hopefully that makes you win in the end. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Noah. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to be on your show.